Ask the Dean, episode 96, with the marvelous Mapped team. I am Dr. Ryan Gray, one of your co-hosts here every single day. We got questions coming in already. It's awesome. Before we jump into introducing my marvelous castmates here, if you want to ask a question, go over to mapped.tv and ask your questions over there. That's where we'll pull them from. But we're here to answer all of your pre-health related questions. So if you have them, come along. Verinia Granum, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so
Verinia,
much.
you are the former pre-health and STEM advisor at Hofstra. And now you get to hang out with us and help us over here at Mapped, helping students on their journey, editing essays, doing advising sessions, answering lots of questions in Mapped chat, all that fun stuff.
And I get to do it live here with you all as well. So
live every single Wednesday. Almost every Wednesday.
Yes.
Well, we are happy to have you here.
Thank you.
With Verinia Granum, we have Dr. Scott Wright, former director of admissions at UT Southwestern and retired executive director at TMDSAS.
Hello.
Hello,
everyone out there in the pre-med world.
So, Scott, you have been all over the pre-health world and professional world, going from medical school to pre-health advising to running a whole application service. What's your favorite part?
Meeting with students.
Yeah,
is my favorite part. I did that frequently at UT Southwestern when students would come in and have questions, or they were unsuccessful in their application, and so that we were, I would give them feedback on kind of things that they could do. I enjoyed it in my pre-med advisor role, meeting with the students and working with them over many years or months in the cycle to put together a good application. I did that some, not as much at TMDSAS, but meeting with students is the best part. And Verinia, you probably agree with that.
Absolutely. My favorite thing was just seeing them at orientation and then kind of following them through to their application year and graduation. It was just so exciting to see that.
Yeah,
their
it's
growth.
the best part. Yeah. It's the best part.
And they were always so surprised that I remembered them from orientation. I'm like, I remember everyone. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. So if you are watching, come ask questions over at map.tv. That's where we pull them from. And we'll start answering them now.
Yeah.
Vernie, go ahead.
Alrighty. Jacob asks, thanks for starting us off, Jacob. In the med school app process, why is there no assessment of dexterity for applicants interested in becoming surgeons? Athletes have combines and pro days, so why don't surgeons? Ooh, so this is a little above my head, but
interesting.
It's a great question.
So Jacob, they used to, right? They used to. They Scott, I don't know if you were around the mythical years where it's like, oh, you're a Gen Surge applicant. Suture this slice of cheese together. Have you heard stories like that?
No.
Yeah. So
Never
they
heard
used
that.
to. Apparently this thing called maybe the ADA, the American with Disabilities Act. It's like, yeah, you really can't discriminate based on that. So at the end of the day, that's probably a big part of it is discrimination just towards people with disabilities. And a lot of those people probably are self-selecting themselves out of careers that maybe they intrinsically know that they can't do. And it's interesting. I was telling actually Scott and Verinia, you guys, when we were in DC together, a story of my good friend Dr. Coffin in medical school, which is a very unfortunate name for a doctor, but Dr. Coffin had a very I wouldn't say a bad tremor, but he had an essential tremor. So in anatomy lab, when he would go to like cut something, he had a tremor and his hand would shake. And I talked to him about that. I'm like, have you thought about like a career, and have you talked to people about if you want to do surgery but can't do surgery? And I think he kind of knew, like, I'm probably not going to be a surgeon. And at the end of the day, it is what it is, right? So I think they used to, they don't anymore, probably for legal reasons. And the bigger thing is, in my specialty stories podcast, where I get to talk to lots of deans and directors, or not deans and directors, lots of program directors of residencies and fellowships, the overwhelming answer is the technical skills can be taught. It's a question I ask almost every time. From a technical standpoint, those things can be taught. Sure, maybe some visual spatial kind of talent, knowing kind of three-dimensionally, being able to visualize that stuff is good to have. But outside of that, the technique and hands and dexterity, like all of that can be taught.
Yeah, and I would add to that, Jacob, medical schools are not training surgeons. They're training doctors. And the curriculum is largely the same for everyone. It is the residency program that trains surgeons. If that kind of dexterity requirement was needed anywhere, that would be the point at which, that would come into play in a much greater way. And this adds to the fact that, you may go into the application process into medical school itself thinking, I want to be a surgeon. And the great likelihood is that you're going to change your mind during medical school.
Yeah.
Yep.
Definitely.
Man, what is it with doctors and cutting things?
That's how we do it.
The just a brief one more thing. The dental school test used to include that they had to carve a piece of soap into they would tell them, carve this piece of soap into X, into a whatever. And that was part of the test, just to test that kind of manual dexterity. They don't do that anymore and haven't for many, many, many years. But that was similar kind of thing.
Yeah. And that makes a little bit more sense from a kind of a pre-dental world, because all of dentistry is basically
yes, absolutely
working with teeth and dexterity and all that fun stuff.
In a very small space.
The DAT does have that kind of spatial testing.
They do
that three-dimensional stuff.
Yeah, we'd encourage students to take those types of ceramics classes, anything with your hands.
Yeah. Okay. I would crush those.
Yeah.
I'm very good with spatial stuff. All right. Question from Ahmed. For this cycle, would submitting the application in the beginning of July be considered late? Should I take this one? You're the boss. Do what you want.
Ahmed, it's a little bit later in the cycle to submit, yes. And depending, I don't know if you're applying AMCAS or ACOMAS, but remember with AMCAS, it takes several weeks to be verified. So if you're submitting in July, you're not getting verified until, later in August, which puts you sort of at the tail end of things. So something to consider. But at the same time, for whatever the reasons are, if that's when you can apply, just make sure that everything is solid, that everything has been reviewed and you're ready to apply. I don't know that, without knowing your situation, I don't know whether I would say wait till next year or not. But generally speaking, it's a little bit sort of, you're kind of hitting it kind of close to be later in the cycle.
Yeah.
Yep.
Why is that? Rolling admissions, right? At the end of the day, rolling admissions.
Rolling admissions. So everyone that applied back in, June 1st or whatever has been verified and sent off.
Yeah, it's interesting. I heard a good quote at some point that basically was, applying late to medical school is your first failed med school test. It's an open book test. You know what you need to have ready to go. There's no reason to apply late other than you just weren't organized and didn't prioritize the things that you had to do. And sure, maybe you're studying for the MCAT and you want to focus 1000% on the MCAT. I would still argue that you should use your breaks for the MCAT to work on your application. that
Mhm.
1,000% of your time going into the MCAT isn't necessarily good either, and that you
Right.
should take breaks and give your brain something else to work on.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, and the
Absolutely.
later you get, right, there I'm sure are plenty of students who get into medical school who apply in July. I know TMDSAS has sometimes put out some data that shows the number of students who apply in May, June, July, August, and the percentage of those students who actually get interviews and are accepted. And there is a big drop as the months go on.
Yep.
So it's important.
Mhm.
All right.
Mhm.
Here's a question for our TMDSAS expert.
Okay.
Yusuf asks, when does the TMDSAS application open up? And can you essentially use the same activities, descriptions, and personal statement that you use for AMCAS on TMDSAS?
Great question. TMDSAS opens up the beginning of May. It's usually around May 1st. It depends a little bit on what day of the week May 1st falls on, et cetera, things like that. But it's usually around the first part of May. You can find that out easily on the TMDSAS website. In terms of activity descriptions and personal statement, there are different lengths. The personal statement for AMCAS is 5,300 characters. For TMDSAS, it's only 5,000, which is not a huge difference, but it will require a little tinkering. You can use the same personal statement, of course. Activity descriptions, a whole different ballgame. AMCAS, 700 characters for the activity description. TMDSAS, 300 characters, which means very, very different. You can use the same just basic activities that you're using for either one, but you have to really truncate significantly what you're saying about the activity. For TMDSAS, you really have to just stick with a brief description of what you did. You can't tell a story. It's really hard to do anything other than just a kind of cursory of what that activity was about, and maybe you can say a little bit about what you learned there. The most meaningful for AMCAS, 1,325 characters. For TMDSAS, 500 characters. So that's another significant difference. Again, you can say the same things, but you have to just really make significant changes to the length of those things. And so there are some pretty significant differences.
Yeah. And then one other big one is the 2 extra essays, right?
2 extra essays, correct.
One required and one not required,
Optional.
but still required.
Optional.
Yes.
Consider the optional essay required on TMDSAS.
Yep.
And I would caution trying not to avoid writing like one description that you're going to use for both. I had a student do it recently, and I met with her recently about it. She reapplied, and I saw her previous application, and it was an AMCAS application, but with TMDSAS character limits, and it was so obvious.
Yeah, it was not good.
That's why she didn't get in. So we
Yeah.
talked about that. So
Yeah. It just reads as lazy.
Yes, absolutely.
So
Yep.
definitely approach both applications with a different
individually,
approach.
correct.
Individually,
Yes.
thank you.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes. The context. They teach us for social media, right? You don't post the same thing on Instagram that you do on YouTube because they're
Right.
different
Right.
platforms,
Absolutely.
different context,
Mhm.
different audience there. So
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
yeah. All right. Here's an interesting question.
Sure. So, question from Yasmin. During in high school, I won several state and national medals or awards, such as the Purple Heart Medal. Can I add these medals to my application? I'm not sure if the Purple Heart is something you get in high school. I mean,
it's not
something
the
else.
Purple
Right.
Heart.
But yeah, I mean, why not? I see it as it's an award. It's high school though, right?
Yeah,
Sorry,
that's the problem.
Sorry, I just reread that. That's the problem. It's
Yeah.
something you earned in high school, and you really just want to focus on things that you've done in college and beyond.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right.
The
And that's
Purple
not
Heart
a
threw me
technical
off.
rule, right? It's not like AMCAS, you put in dates and AMCAS is like, we see that this is part of your high school time. You are not allowed to enter this. Right. It's just a general
Mhm.
rule of thumb that everyone follows.
Yeah.
I actually think, I'm trying to remember now. I think TMDSAS, the application actually blocks that.
Oh,
Because
really?
you have to put in your high school graduation date. So I think it blocks that. I can't remember for sure, but I think it does.
Yeah. Sorry,
So,
Yasmin.
Yasmin, sorry. It comes
Mm.
up a lot,
Mhm.
especially with scouts.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
people who get Eagle Scout at 17, 18 as a senior in high school, and they want to put that on there. And it's just like,
Can't.
sorry. All right, this one comes up a lot.
All right, let's see. Amy, if I'm reapplying, is it okay to reuse the same watering events as previous personal statements? I want to keep one the same and will change the second one. Some people told me medical schools want to read something different. Yeah. Yes, Amy, you do want to show, you're a reapplicant. That means you've done different things since you previously applied, right? You don't want to submit the same exact essay or personal statement. You want to talk a little bit about, generally speaking, right? The point of the personal statement is to talk about why you want to be a doctor. And if one of those events significantly impacted you, then you can talk about it, but update it a little bit, phrase it differently. Maybe you have a different reflection of it now that you've had more time away from it. So definitely want to present something different a little bit. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's confusing, right? Because we talk about the personal statement being, why do you want to be a doctor? And if I'm supposed to change why I want to be a doctor because I need to reapply, it's like, well, no. And it's been a year since you applied
Mm-hmm.
last time. Do you have maybe something a little bit more meaningful from an
Mm-hmm.
experience that you want to write about? Or you've changed as a person over the last year. Do you say things a little bit different? Can you
Yep.
reflect a little bit differently on the experiences that you've already written about to massage the essay some?
Do we know if medical schools look back at the previous application when they have reapplicants?
Sometimes they do.
They do.
They
Right.
can is the answer,
Mhm.
right?
They can.
Whether or not they do.
Right.
Sometimes
Right.
I think it depends on the student and kind of the situation and stuff
Right.
like that. So, but there's
Yep.
potential.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, it would be interesting, right? My assumption would be, okay, I can see this student reapplied. They're applying this year with a 515. Last year they applied with a 503. That's probably why we didn't give them a deeper look last year. So I'm not even going to bother looking at the essays.
Right.
But if all things are equal, like if just at a
Mhm.
glance all the stats are the same and the courses haven't been updated, I'm like, I wonder what they said last year that caused them to not get this far.
Yep.
Yep.
So
And
that,
guess
that
what?
would be an interesting
And
thing.
if it's the same thing, guess what? Yeah, it's not going to go well.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that is it. We get lots of, is this clinical questions? I'm not going to bother today, unfortunately. Go to isitclinical.com and register there. We'll have some fun tool up at that site soon. So how do we figure this one out?
All right. Hey, Tina. Most of the schools that I'm interested in have very similar mission statements. If this is the case, how do I determine which schools are the best fit for me? Great question, Tina.
Yeah.
Because it's true, right? You sort of start to see that they all have the same missions or similar mission statements.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Scott, you interfaced a lot with many medical schools as the executive director at TMDSAS. How do schools figure out their mission statements, and do they like when they would all gather, would they like have a little meeting of the minds and go, okay, like we're going to say this in our mission statement, like you stay away from that language?
This big powwow.
No, that doesn't happen. No, I think that mission statements are a more broad thing across the medical school. The institution is doing it with help of high-level deans, presidents, faculty committees and chairs and stuff like that determine what their mission statement is going to be or what their values are going to be or whatever. And I think the reason why often they look the same is because if you think about it, the mission of these institutions is very similar. They're and so of course these statements are going to be very commonly similar. Tina, I think that one of the things that you want to do, because if you just go to their admissions website, that's not, it's helpful, but it's not the full picture of what this medical school is all about. You have to poke around in the entirety of the website and really dig down in the website and see what are they doing, what kind of research is going on here, what kind of connection do they have to the community, what depending on what you're looking for in a medical school will dictate that a little bit, and really get deep into those websites. And you're going to run into a lot of password protected things and stuff, but if you do that, just back out of it and go somewhere else, and just spend some time really digging down and into there. But you have to have a good sense of what you're looking for first before you can really see if a medical school has that. So I think for every applicant, they should determine what are they looking for in a medical school, X, Y, what A, B, C, D, E, whatever. Just line out what curricularly, what do you want to see, what really is your style of learning, and what med schools fit there, things like that. You've got to have a good sense of that before you can go and look at these med schools and really feel where the fit might occur.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it was interesting. This is the first time I've thought about this type of kind of analogy of going to the school's website, trying to figure out mission. And as you said, Scott, right, the school's job is to train future physicians. And that's going to be the same everywhere. And a lot of big academic medical centers are there to serve underserved areas and get federal funding and government funding for that. It's like trying to, if you were like a Major League Baseball prospect, you're like, well, what team do I want to go to? Let me go look at the Reds. Well, it looks like they say they want to win a national championship. Let me go look at the Rays. Well, they say they want to win a national championship too. Like, I don't know how I'm supposed to decide. So it's interesting. At the end of the day, the institutions are there to do very, very, very similar things. And so you have to go kind of one step, two steps beyond that.
Yeah. Yep. Definitely.
Good question, though.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Always a good question. Upward trend question.
Question from another Amy. Should I not reapply to schools that told me my GPA is low when I asked for feedback? I have a 3.4, strong upward trend, 4.0 in post-bac with 30 science credits, but some schools said they recommend SMP.
Yeah, so let me lead with this one because I asked at the med school fair for the osteopathic medical schools a week ago. I signed in under an alias, a secret name. And one of the directors of admissions, who I'm friends with, was talking, and she was talking about the cutoffs that they have at their medical school, and it's a 3.0 GPA, I think cumulative and science, and a 496, I think was their minimum cutoff for MCAT. And so I asked the question. I was like, what if I have less than a 3.0, but my last 50 credits are a 4.0? And her response? Doesn't matter. We don't look at trends. All right, and so this is the frustrating part of this process. Every medical school is different.
Yeah.
Every medical school admissions committee has a different process with how they evaluate students. And so on the Mapped app platform, we allow you to look at your GPA in lots of different ways. And we love looking at trends. We talk about trends all the time because lots of schools are okay with upward trends with lower GPAs, but not every school is. And so, Amy, for you, if you were told by some schools and they knew explicitly 3.4 GPA, but 30 credits at a 4.0, and they still said, yeah, you should probably do an SMP, then that's probably the answer.
Yep.
That they're not going to take a look at you even with that upward trend. And that's okay. That's okay.
So, yeah. So the answer to your question is I wouldn't apply there.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. A good question that we need to just highlight the C- in prereqs.
Natalie asks, I got a C- in my Ochem 1 lab. Should I retake it? I got an A+ on my Ochem 2 lab. Yeah, sorry, Natalie. So C- is not a passing grade, regardless of how you did in the second part or in the second lab. You will have to retake that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not considered a passing grade for medical school prereqs.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Unfortunately,
And just to show off Mapped App here. So when students use Mapped App, they enter their courses. What will happen if you have a prereq, as you see here under freshman chemistry? I'll zoom in a little bit. Under freshman chemistry, this grade is a C-, and it's at the University of Georgia, so it's even worse because a C- at University of Georgia is like an F at Florida because you know
Oof.
it's not as rigorous, but you can see this little red like, hey, and it says because of your grade, this may not fulfill your prereq. Check with your advisor and or target med schools. The far majority, if not all medical schools, don't consider a C- passing.
Yeah.
Even if you got an A+ on the follow-up class.
Yep. And for those of you from the University of Georgia, Ryan's cell phone number is.
I'm sure they can find him somewhere. This thing called YouTube.
Yeah, about that. So here's another one, right? Kind of playing off of that, the whole depends on the school, what grade you're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, question from Vishank. I'm currently headed to U Chicago as a transfer student. I'm a little scared because U Chicago is known to deflate grades and be tougher on students. Do medical schools take this into consideration? I personally did not know this about U Chicago, that this was a thing, but no.
I think every student who goes to a hard school is like, they deflate grades here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, medical schools will not take that into consideration.
No, not largely. No. I mean,
No.
there may be some, very subjective, point at an admissions committee meeting where they're discussing and they say, well, and that's U Chicago. So, but generally speaking, and no, they're not gonna.
Yeah.
And there's no formulaic algorithm that alters your GPA based on your major or based on where you went to school.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And so, and those conversations, those more detailed conversations typically will happen after lots of rounds of review and, okay, let's bring him in for an interview and all this stuff. So it's not like your
final stages.
Yeah. Your 3.4 is not going to get you off of the hook and get you an interview when everyone else needs a 3.7 just because you went to U Chicago.
Right.
Yep.
Unfortunately. Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, so a lot of students and a lot of parents, actually, because I'm in a lot of parent groups now, parents start talking about this. It's like, well, should I send my student there? I heard this about U Chicago and they deflate grades and this and that. And I still think the answer at the end of the day is a student should go to the school where they think they will do the best personally, like from just a enjoyment standpoint, a happiness standpoint, just thriving and the network that they want to have and the community they want to have around them. And if the school is known to deflate grades a little bit, okay, like just work a little bit harder, maybe. I don't know. Like it's just part of the game. And it's one of the reasons why, and I'll probably shoot myself in the foot for saying this because it's a feature in MAP that at some point I think I want to build in. But sites like Rate My Professor,
oh god,
students try to play this game of like, oh, I'm going to go to this professor and that professor because they're the easier professor. I'm like, if you're trying to, like, life doesn't work that way. So stop trying to game the system.
Yep.
Oh, the nightmares. I have PTSD from Rate My Professor because I would have students, I would help them create a beautiful schedule and then they would go and look up the professor's rating and want to change everything based on that.
Yeah.
Gosh. Anyway.
Yep. All right.
I always wondered why they didn't ask on Rate My Professor, or maybe they do. What grade did you make in the class?
Yeah,
I
that'd be
think they
good.
share that.
Do they?
Yeah, and then if it's a low grade, they'll say it was, the professor's fault. But
Right.
Of course, it's always the professor's.
of course,
Yeah. Yeah, but I think it's an interesting feature that students want and like. And so built into MAP at some point, I think it should be there because
Ooh.
students like it. And how do we add context around that?
Mhm.
All
Yeah,
right.
good point.
All right. So here's a question. We were actually talking about this with some of the new mapped features, which I can show students in a second.
Sure. Tristan asks, or says, he's a huge fan. Thank you. I had a question about AMCAS classification for classes. Very timely. I took a grad class where I taught undergrads physiology. Since the content is technically greater than 60% bio, could I mark it a bio class?
So, Scott, the class is a graduate level class.
Mhm.
Do graduate level classes count as prereqs?
No.
Yeah.
No.
I
And
think
it's not
that's
going to
easy answer.
count in the undergrad GPA if it's a grad class.
Right.
But even as a grad class, you still have to categorize and classify them as whether they're, whatever they are. And so Tristan, what I would say to you is you mark it the way you think it is. If you feel like this is a bio class because of the content and stuff, then mark it as a bio class. And then AMCAS is in the process of verifying your application and validating it and all that. In that processing, they are going to, if they don't agree with that, they'll make a change.
So I want to dig a little bit deeper on that question. Do graduate level courses count as prereqs?
Correct.
What if a student does an SMP? They were a history major, didn't take any sciences, and they go do an SMP.
Well, that's different. I think medical schools see that as different. If it's an SMP that is designed for example, for second career people who have no background in science, then that's kind of a different. That's the way it's structured. That's why it's structured in that way, etc. I think that what I have seen in the past is that is more frequent is somebody had a major in engineering or something, didn't have any whatever biology. They went and took a graduate level class because they're a graduate student in chemistry and engineering, and they took a graduate class in bio. That's not going to work for their purposes.
Yeah. So I think we can't broadly say graduate level classes don't count as prereqs or can't count as prereqs, because I think it just depends on the situation.
Yeah. I mean, I would say generally they don't.
Yeah.
But when you look at specific situations, and medical schools have the ability to say, okay, we'll accept this. If they look at it, we can. Even their material may say undergraduate classes only, but if you make the case before them, they have the power to do whatever they want to do. It's their institution, so they can say, okay, we'll take that.
Yeah. So a deeper thought here is that the classification of courses can get very confusing for students. And this comes up a lot historically, I see, with exercise physiology, also known as kinesiology majors and courses. For some silly reason, AMCAS says kinesiology is kind of a non-science course. If you go look at a course classification guide.
Right.
A lot of the kinesiology classes are physiology classes.
Yeah.
So I'm like, that's science. Like you can't argue against me that that's not science. And so I always tell students, you can't just look at the classification of the course, whether it's kinesiology or if it's a biology course, right? It has the bio kind of course classification code, but it's writing about biology is the actual course. That's not a biology course, even though it's a bio course number. So it takes some critical thinking and some thought process on your side of things to figure out what really is this. And so that leads into looking at an update of Mapped that we had this last week, where now in Mapped, because we have student courses here, and you can see this fulfills prereqs section, this drop down here. When you are entering your courses, you have the ability, and Mapped will try to predict what it is just based on some naming of classes. So when this student entered general biochemistry, Mapped said, hey, this is a biochemistry course, right? And selected it accordingly. And that then translates into the dashboard, where we have some general prereqs, kind of the most standard ones that most schools have. And we can see what's going on here. And we see in our med school list, which is brand new, the school list here. So when you pop up here, these are all of the schools that this student, this demo account, has flagged as like, hey, these are the schools that I'm interested in applying to. And I can quickly look on the side here that I haven't met the prereqs for any of them yet. I'm still shy. And then we have Creighton, where it says 0. So Creighton may be an outlier where there are no prereqs, and that's what it looks like. And so that's a bug that we'll just have to figure out what's going on there. But if we look at University of Alabama, Birmingham, we can see that this student, these are the required prereqs based on this source, and it's a link to the website where we pulled all of this data from. And it says, hey, you need 2 semesters of biology, you need 1 semester of biochemistry, you need 2 semesters of physics. And it tells me, what have I met? What haven't I met? And this should hopefully let students understand, like, whatever school requires statistics, I don't want to take statistics. I'm not going to add that school to my list. So hopefully we'll give more insights and more power to students to pick the schools based on actual data of what they have going on.
Yeah.
And that's built into Mapped. It's free, part of the free plan on Mapped. So everyone should go get Mapped. If you want to use Mapped Pro, you can check it out, use it for 30 days using the referral code there, 30 days free at mapped.com. So lots of fun stuff.
Cool.
All right, let's continue diving into some more questions. Let me see. This comes up a lot, especially kind of post-COVID world that we live in.
Yeah. Okay. Question from Thomas. How do med schools feel about online courses taken after 2021? I want to take the rest of my degree online because of time I don't have to spend driving to school. Yeah. Well, Thomas, I mean, COVID showed us that it's possible to take online classes, right, and do well in these classes. The material is certainly still the same, if not more challenging. But I think schools are still going to decide what they're going to decide, whether or not they're going to accept it or not. And if you go to their websites, you might even see some schools actually specify whether or not they accept online classes. So doing your research, looking at the schools that you're interested in applying, and checking to see if they accept those. I think my hope is that kind of changes as we move further and further along. But the answer is it's still up in the air.
It is up in the air. So so one school that I know of specifically, Hopkins, actually, so obviously well-known medical school, has specifically stated on their website that their online policy has changed. Before, I don't think they accepted online courses, or maybe it was case by case. Obviously, with COVID, they had to accept online courses. And they said, why do we have this arbitrary rule that students can't take online courses? And they've changed it that said, we accept online courses no matter when you've taken them, which is awesome. Like, hey,
it is awesome
progress.
and reasonable. Yeah.
We're checking our biases at the door and going, why have we always said this? We as a medical school taught our medical students online and it worked.
Yeah.
So why do we care if prereqs or any classes are done online?
No.
Amazing, right?
Yeah. It is amazing.
So hopefully they follow suit.
Yes. Hopefully they do.
Question from Perea, maybe? I'm sorry. What would you consider is the appropriate level of storytelling someone should deliver in their personal statement? Someone's been following us. I worry about being boring, but I also don't want to propose a narrative. Great. Thank you. Yeah. So storytelling, right? So this is your personal statement. It's not a novel. It's not a creative writing piece. When we talk about telling a story, is just talking about an experience or an activity that you had, and in a way that emotionally connects to the reader, right? And that's not necessarily a fictional narrative, right? It's just talking about what happened, but in not just like a dry and boring description. And I did this and I did this and they did that. It's more about this is what happened. This is what was happening around it, what I was thinking, what I was feeling around this time, how how it impacted me, what impact I had on that person. So to say that there's a level, I don't know that I can quantify it. I can just say that it's not a creative writing piece. Obviously, this is your experience. You just want to connect with the reader emotionally. What were your feelings around that event, and not just kind of a boring, step 1, step 2. This is what happened. Did I do okay, Dr. Gray?
Wow, Dr. Wright, what do you think? So the typical issue we see is students going overboard without one very important next step. What's that next step that students often forget about when they go a little bit too in depth with stories?
They miss the depth of understanding and meaning. What's the value of this to you? What did this mean to you? Why are you telling me this?
Yeah.
That's
the reflection.
The reflection part. That's the key. And that, in my view, that's the difference between a good essay and a great essay. Great personal statements get down underneath an event or an experience and look at why was this. It's the difference between, and I've said this many times, it's the difference between what and so what. The what is the story. The what is the experience and your description of it. The so what is, what difference does it make? Why are you telling me this, as opposed to any other story that you could tell me?
Yep. Exactly. Good. Okay. Lulu.
If you submitted your primary, but things came up and you submitted no secondaries and also didn't upload all LORs, are you still considered a reapplicant? Yeah. You submitted your primary, Lulu. So yeah, that starts the ball rolling.
Yep.
Easy as pie.
Yep.
We don't have our MCAT expert here today. She's not feeling very well. Rachel, you were missed, but got a good MCAT question here.
All right. Michaela, my MCAT breakdown is 129, 125, 130, 130. I'm so thrilled about my score, 514, because it was my retake and I went from a 498.
Wow, excellent. Great, Michaela.
But I'm wanting to know if schools will be okay with a 125 in cars. Yeah.
Yeah, I think some of those, I feel like we say this a lot, but it depends. It depends on the school. And some schools probably are going to be like, that's a kind of low. Now, having said that, I think that many schools, many medical schools recognize that if there's any commonality in terms of lower sections, cars is going to be it. That's the section that a lot of students struggle on, that a lot of students have a little bit lower score on that. if they're going to have a lower score on anything, it often is that. So it really does depend on the medical school and on kind of what their own deal is, and that is often dictated by whoever's in charge of their process, either the chair of the committee on admissions or the dean or director of admissions is going to kind of set the tone for how they're going to respond to that sort of profile. The question, I think, is what's your option here? I don't really recommend retaking the MCAT again for one section score. So I think, I think you've got a good solid total score. I would go for it with that score. And if a medical school is going to reject you because of that, so be it.
Yeah. My personal opinion is that this whole unbalanced MCAT score stuff, especially having 125s and above in all of your sections, it's an overblown conspiracy theory amongst pre-meds. Like,
I agree.
It's bad.
And at the end of the day, like, there's nothing you can do. Will there be a school that maybe has a cutoff and says, no, we're not interested? Maybe.
Well, you can uproot your life and not apply to medical school and try to retake it and spend lots of money on cars tutoring.
Or you can count on having a strong application and another school's gonna.
Here's the good news. Here's the good news. Because the vanity of U.S. News and World Reports, medical schools report stats. That's one of the parts of the methodology is what is your MCAT score for students? What is your GPA for students? The average GPA and MCAT score for the students that matriculated or were accepted. They're not asking about subsections. They're just asking for total score on U.S. News and World Report. So that's a point for not caring about the subsections as much as the overall score.
I agree.
And Lulu would like to know what Michaela's ways are.
What are your ways?
What are your ways? Show us your ways. Okay. Bruno would like to know. The pre-med advisor said...
We don't talk about Bruno.
Oh, no.
No.
We'll talk about this, Bruno.
All right.
The pre-med advisor said clinical in a pediatric setting wasn't good enough. That I should have had adult clinical too. I'm sorry. Should I start a last-minute adult clinical for this cycle?
So here's
maybe we won't talk about Bruno.
So
sorry.
I read this when I put it up there. I thought it said pediatric setting, and I'm like, okay, that's an interesting question. If I saw that it said pediatric, I wouldn't have thrown it up there because that's just terrible advice.
It's awful advice.
Yeah,
awful.
Those
advice.
Pediatricians are just
they're not real. They're not real doctors. They're
children
just like,
are not people.
Oh my God! What horrible advice.
Sorry.
I mean, the logical end of that is you get into adult medicine, and I'm sorry, you only saw primary care adult medicine.
Right.
You need to go and get something that is specialty adult medicine.
Yeah. No. And then you go and do GI. Like, I'm sorry, you only saw the inside of people. You should look at the outside of them too.
Here's a secret. People are just children that are bigger. Adults are just bigger children.
I can verify.
Some more so than in other cases.
I can verify. Someone is having fun posting inappropriate comments that are very fun to read. But so this is kind of a follow up to what we were saying earlier about like UChicago.
Brandon asks, so a B at an Ivy League is the same as a B at a state school? Why go to an Ivy League? Mostly rhetorical question.
That is the question. Yeah. Why? We put these schools up on a pedestal. And if you have bigger aspirations and the school's not going to support you in a way that you're going to thrive at the school and you're just doing it for the name recognition, but it's going to hurt your GPA, why?
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here's a question, Scott, that you may be able to help Raquel answer.
Yeah. How do med students afford housing if they aren't working?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's called financial aid. The financial aid package from a a given medical school is going to consider a variety of things in terms of how much you need to attend that medical school, and that includes housing as a part of that evaluation. It also is different for different areas of the country, recognizing that it costs more to live in one state or in one area of a state than it does in another, and so that's going to be adjusted depending on the amount. But the cost of attendance, and Ryan's got a good example up there, UT Southwestern, it's going to dictate a variety of things that they're going to include, which is books and living expenses and stuff like that.
Yeah. So the answer is the cost of attendance is what dictates the loans that you take out. It's
Correct.
not just tuition.
Right.
So the school understands that you need to eat, you need a roof over your head, you need transportation costs, all of that fun stuff. And so a lot of people will go, oh, it's really cheap to go to medical school in Texas. It's only $23,000. But you're actually taking out $55,000 in loans every year to
live,
get through medical school. So
Right.
that's I wouldn't call it a dirty little secret about the whole loan process and medical school costs, but it's a bigger picture that most students don't think about.
Right.
So that's a good one.
Yeah.
Let's get one more question here. Blah, 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 blah. Let's do this one. We're right around this time where students are thinking about this kind of thing.
Sure. Question from Ahmed. Hi, thanks for being here for us. You're welcome, Ahmed. Is it a good idea to submit my application without my MCAT score in order to have my application processed early and have my MCAT score entered not much later? Is it a good idea? Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Ahmed.
You do not need your MCAT score to submit your application. You need personal statement.
One school.
You actually don't need that. You can leave it blank if you want. Yeah. You need all your demographic information. You need your transcript information. You need a personal statement, ideally, all of your extracurricular activities and descriptions and all of that. And then you need at least one school to apply to. Letters of recommendations, MCAT score, all of that stuff can come later.
Yeah, and I thought I saw this earlier in the comments. Don't consider that school a throwaway school. That's a school that no matter what, if you get accepted, that you would be willing to go there. This isn't a throwaway anything.
The throwaway, Vrini, do you know why they use a throwaway school? Why they assume that you should just use the throwaway school?
I honestly don't know. I don't know
It's the fear of being labeled a reapplicant to a school.
Oh.
And it's just like it's an unfounded fear. So
yeah, no.
No. I think University of Florida is the throwaway school, right? Isn't that that's the general throwaway school.
Oh no.
Oh!
He's having technical difficulties. We don't talk about Ryan. Sorry.
Don't do that to me. Well, everyone, it's been a wonderful Ask the Dean, episode 96. We have 4 more till the great 100. We'll have some fireworks, some celebrations during that time. Vrini Granum, Dr. Scott Wright, myself, and Rachel, who's not here today. We're all available for some one-on-one advising if you have questions about this process. Me less so than other people, just with everything else I got going on. But we are available to help you, whether it's essay editing, mock interviews, all of that fun stuff. So go check it all out at mapped.com and go get that free 30-day trial of Mapped Pro over at mapped.com as well, using that 30 days free promo code. And we'll see you next week here at 1 p.m. Eastern every Wednesday, or most Wednesdays. Have a great day.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.